Princess stood at the window of her chamber and watched the human ship descend through the clouds. The vessel was ugly by standards. It had no elegant curves or flowing lines. It was all hard angles and thick armor plating, built for war rather than beauty. She supposed that said everything about the species she was about to marry into. Her handmaiden moved quietly behind her, adjusting the ceremonial robes that marked as a daughter of the imperial bloodline. The fabric was worth more than most planets. Today it felt like chains. The Galactic Council had brokered this peace after 3 years of border conflicts. The humans had proven surprisingly difficult to defeat. They fought with a ferocity that shocked commanders who had expected easy victory over such a young species. When the Council proposed a marriage alliance, his father had agreed immediately. Someone had to pay the price for peace, and that someone was her. She knew almost nothing about her future husband. His name was Cole. He held the rank of captain in the human military. He had volunteered for this arrangement, which struck her as either noble or stupid, probably both. The ship landed on the ceremonial platform below, watched a ramp extend and a single figure walk down onto soil. He was smaller than she expected. Humans were supposed to be large and brutish, but this one stood perhaps a hand shorter than her. He wore a simple uniform without decoration. No medals, no honors displayed, nothing to indicate his status. He simply stood there and waited. Touched her shoulder gently. It was time. Descended through the palace corridors she had known since childhood. Each step brought her closer to a future she had not chosen. Her people lived for thousands of years. Humans barely reached 100. She would watch this man grow old and die while she remained young. The council called it a small sacrifice for peace. She called it a life sentence. The great hall was filled with nobles, all dressed in their finest garments. They parted as she entered, their faces carefully blank. She knew what they thought. The princess, reduced to breeding stock for a primitive species. Some her. Most were simply grateful it was not them. Cole stood at the altar where countless unions had been blessed. He looked out of place among the flowing architecture and soft lights. His uniform was crisp and clean, but it was still the uniform of a soldier. He turned as she approached, and she got her first clear look at his face. He was not ugly. His features were regular and unremarkable, the kind of face that would disappear in any crowd. But his eyes caught her attention. They were brown, a common color among humans, yet there was something in them she did not expect. He looked at her not with lust or possession, but with something that resembled understanding, as if he knew exactly how she felt and did not blame her for it. The ceremony was brief. Unions were usually celebrated for days, but no one wanted to extend this farce longer than necessary. The priest spoke the words of binding, repeated them in a voice that did not shake, because she was a princess and princesses did not show weakness. Cole spoke his own vows in accented, clearly rehearsed but sincere in delivery. When it was done, they were married. The nobles applauded politely and began to drift away, eager to gossip about the spectacle they had witnessed. Found herself alone with her husband in the reception chamber. Servants had laid out food and drink, then vanished. The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Cole spoke first. His voice was quiet, neither deep nor high, just ordinary. He said that he knew this was not what she wanted. He said that he would try to make it as bearable as possible. He asked nothing of her except basic courtesy, and even that he would understand if she could not provide. She stared at him. This was not what she had expected. Where was the crude barbarian she had been warned about? Where was the primitive creature who would see her only as a prize to be claimed? She asked him why he volunteered for this. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said that someone had to. The Alliance needed a human willing to leave everything behind. His commanders asked for volunteers and no one raised their hand. He knew what that meant. Eventually, someone would be forced, some young officer with a family waiting at home, with a life they did not want to abandon. So he stepped forward instead. She asked if he had no family of his own. He shook his head. His parents died when he was young. He had no siblings, no wife, no children. The military was his only home. Giving it up hurt, but it would have hurt someone else more. Did not know what to say. She had prepared herself for a monster and found something else entirely. This human had sacrificed his career, his home, and his future so that a stranger would not have to. Her people prided themselves on honor and nobility, but she could not think of a single who would have done the same. She told him that she did not understand humans at all. He smiled slightly. He said that was fair, because he did not understand them either most of the time. Despite everything, she almost laughed. They stood in awkward silence for another moment. Then Cole asked if she would like to eat something. The journey had been long, and he suspected neither of them had much appetite, but it seemed wrong to waste the food. She agreed, and they sat at the table like two strangers sharing a meal by accident. The food was carefully prepared delicacies that Cole examined with obvious uncertainty. He tried each dish without complaint, even the ones that clearly did not suit human taste. When she asked if he found the food acceptable, he admitted that some of it was challenging, but he had eaten worse during military campaigns. She asked about those campaigns, and he deflected with vague answers. She noticed that he never spoke of killing or fighting. He mentioned places and people, small moments of humor or kindness, but nothing of the violence that must have filled his years of service. She wondered if this was shame or simply preference. By the end of the meal, she realized she had spoken more freely with this human than with most nobles. He listened without interrupting. He asked questions that showed genuine interest. He treated her thoughts as worthy of consideration. When servants came to escort them to their separate chambers, Cole rose and offered her a small bow. He said that he was grateful for her company and hoped she slept well. There was no expectation in his voice, no pressure. He simply wished her rest and walked away. Watched him go and felt something shift in her understanding of the universe. Her marriage was still a cage, but perhaps her fellow prisoner was not what she had feared. Perhaps he was something far more confusing. He was kind. She had not prepared for kindness. 3 months passed on the diplomatic station that became their home. It hung in neutral space, a place belonging to no empire, where representatives from dozens of species came to negotiate and scheme. Handled the political work she had trained for since childhood. Cole kept their quarters running with quiet efficiency. She had expected him to be helpless in domestic matters. Human males were supposedly crude creatures who knew only war. Instead, she found that Cole could cook simple meals, maintain their living space, and manage the small details of daily life that she had always left to servants. When she asked where he learned these skills, he said that military life taught self-sufficiency. No one cleaned your quarters for you on a warship. Their routine developed naturally. She woke early to review diplomatic messages. He woke earlier to prepare her morning tea, learning her preferences through careful observation. They shared quiet breakfasts where conversation came easier each day. She began to tell him about politics, the complex web of alliances and grudges that shaped her world. He listened and asked simple questions that sometimes cut straight to the heart of matters she had considered too complex to explain. She discovered his secret project one evening when she returned early from a reception. He sat in their common room with a book open before him, mouthing words silently with intense concentration. His pronunciation was terrible. The accent mangled the flowing syllables into something barely recognizable, but he was trying. He looked up when she entered, embarrassment crossing his face. He admitted that he wanted to read her language properly. The translation devices worked well enough for conversation, but he felt he was missing something important. Poetry, he said, never translated correctly. She sat beside him and asked which poem he was attempting. It was the Lament of, one of the oldest works in literature. A princess who sacrificed everything for her people and was forgotten by history, had studied it as a child and found it unbearably sad. She wondered if Cole understood the parallel he had chosen. She began to teach him the proper sounds. His mouth was not shaped for speech, but he persisted with a determination that surprised her. Night after night he practiced, never growing frustrated, never giving up. Within weeks he could manage simple phrases. Within 2 months he read her a complete stanza without error. She found herself looking forward to these lessons. The diplomatic station brought visitors from across the galaxy. Many were nobles who remembered her from the imperial court. They came to inspect her husband like curious scientists examining a new specimen. Their contempt was barely hidden beneath polite smiles. Lord was the worst. He arrived with his entourage and demanded a private dinner, which political necessity required to provide. He spent the entire evening making cutting remarks about humans in general and coal in particular. He wondered aloud how could bear sharing space with such a primitive creature. He asked if the smell was tolerable. He suggested that perhaps the alliance was not worth the sacrifice of royal dignity. Cole sat through all of it without reaction. He ate his food calmly, answered direct questions with simple courtesy, and ignored the insults as though they were not happening. Watched his face for any sign of anger and found none. His expression remained pleasant and blank, a mask of perfect neutrality. After finally departed, she found Cole on their small balcony, staring out at the stars. She approached and stood beside him in silence for a long moment. She apologized for her people. He shrugged and said there was nothing to apologize for. Lord was one man with one opinion. It meant nothing. She pressed harder. She said that the insults were cruel and undeserved. Cole turned to look at her. His eyes were calm, but something moved behind them, something old and tired. He said that words were just words. He had survived worse. Actual violence, actual hatred, things that left scars on body and mind alike. A nobleman with a sharp tongue could not touch him. She realized then how little she knew about his past. She asked what he meant by worse. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said that maybe someday he would tell her, but not tonight. Tonight he just wanted to watch the stars and remember that the universe was very large and very old, and most problems were very small when viewed from the right distance. She stood with him in silence and found that she did not mind the company. The weeks continued. She noticed small things about her husband that built into a larger picture. He never raised his voice. He never showed temper. He moved through the world with a careful gentleness that seemed almost deliberate, as if he was always conscious of the space he occupied. He learned which foods she preferred and adjusted his cooking. He noticed when she was tired and quietly ensured she had space to rest. He remembered details from conversations weeks earlier and referenced them naturally. Every action spoke of attention, of genuine care for her comfort, and she tested him once, deliberately. She told him she needed a particular document from the archives, knowing it would require hours of searching through bureaucratic channels. He simply nodded and began the work without complaint. When she admitted the test 3 hours later, he only smiled and said that he had suspected but decided to help anyway, just in case it was real. She asked why he was so patient with her. He considered the question seriously. Then he said that they were stuck together for a long time by human standards, and possibly forever by his. Making each other miserable seemed like a waste of that time. He would rather spend it building something good, even if that building took years. Something shifted in her chest when he said those words. She recognized it as the beginning of respect, genuine respect for this strange, small human who had given up everything and asked for nothing in return. She began to share more of herself with him, her fears about the future, her anger at being traded like property, her complicated feelings about her own family. He listened without judgment, offered comfort without empty promises, and never once made her feel foolish for her emotions. In turn, he began to open slightly. He spoke of his childhood on a farming colony, of parents who worked themselves to exhaustion providing for a son they loved. He spoke of the day raiders came and took everything, leaving him alone at 12 years old with nothing but grief and rage. He spoke of joining the military because he had nowhere else to go. But when she asked about his years of service, he went quiet. She learned not to push. One evening she asked him directly. She asked if he was happy, or at least content, with this strange life they had built together. He thought about it for a long moment. Then he said that he was more content than he had been in years, perhaps ever. He said that she treated him like a person rather than a weapon or a political tool. That was more than he had dared hope for. She did not know how to respond, so she simply took his hand briefly, a gesture that surprised them both. Something was changing between them. She was not sure what it would become, but for the first time she was not afraid to find out. The attack came without warning on what should have been an ordinary day. Was attending a council meeting in the station's central chamber. Representatives from 12 species had gathered to discuss trade routes through contested space. Cole sat beside her as he always did during official functions, quiet and unobtrusive, the perfect diplomatic spouse. The first explosion shook the entire station. Warning lights flooded the chamber with red. A second explosion followed, closer this time, and the doors burst inward. Soldiers poured through the breach. They were massive creatures, built for violence, their scaled bodies covered in combat armor. Their weapons swept across the room, and screams erupted as diplomats dove for cover behind overturned tables and chairs. Knew the by reputation. They were raiders who respected no treaties and feared no consequences. They attacked where they pleased and took what they wanted. What they wanted today was obvious. Hostages. A room full of high-value diplomats would bring ransoms that could fund their fleets for years. The representatives around her froze. Her people had evolved away from physical confrontation 10,000 years ago. Their bodies were elegant and graceful but utterly unsuited for combat. They could not fight. They could only hope to survive through negotiation. The lead raised his weapon and shouted for silence. His voice was harsh and grating, translated by the station systems into words she understood. He wanted everyone on the ground, hands visible, no movement. Began to lower herself as commanded. Then she noticed that Cole had not moved. He stood perfectly still beside her, his eyes fixed on the soldiers. His body had changed somehow. The gentle husband she knew had vanished. In his place stood something else entirely. His posture was different, his weight balanced, his hands loose at his sides. He looked like a coiled spring waiting to release. The nearest noticed the human who had not obeyed. He swung his weapon around and barked an order to get down. Cole moved. Had never seen anything like it. Her eyes could barely track what happened. One moment Cole was standing still. The next moment he was inside the soldier's guard, his hands doing something too fast to follow. The soldier's weapon discharged into the ceiling. Then the soldier was falling, his throat crushed, and Cole had the weapon in his hands. He fired 3 times, 3 dropped. The remaining soldiers reacted, but they were too slow. Cole was already moving, using the falling bodies as cover, closing distance with a speed that should not have been possible for a species that considered primitive. He fought like water flowing downhill, like a force of nature that could not be stopped or redirected. He took a hit to the shoulder. It did not slow him. He took another across his ribs. He kept moving. Twice his size grabbed him from behind, and Cole somehow twisted free and put the creature down with a strike could not even see properly. 90 seconds, that was all it took. When it ended, 7 lay dead on the chamber floor. Cole stood in the center of them, breathing hard, blood running from multiple wounds. The stolen weapon hung loose in his grip. His eyes swept the room once, confirming no more threats, and then found her. He asked if she was hurt. His voice was strained but calm, as if he had just finished a moderately difficult task rather than single-handedly killing 7 elite warriors. She could not speak. Her mind refused to process what she had witnessed. Cole limped toward her, and she realized his leg was injured too. He had been fighting on a damaged leg the entire time. He reached her side and lowered himself to one knee, putting himself at her eye level. He asked again if she was hurt. His hand reached out but stopped short of touching her, waiting for permission as he always did. She managed to shake her head. Good, he said, then he needed to check the others. He rose and moved through the chamber, checking each diplomat for injuries, applying basic first aid where needed. The nobles stared at him with expressions of pure shock. They had just watched this small, quiet human transform into something out of their oldest nightmares. Station security finally arrived, far too late to matter. They found the aftermath and could not believe their sensors. 1 human against 7. It should have been impossible. Medical teams took Cole to the station's treatment center. Followed without thinking, her feet carrying her while her mind remained frozen. She sat outside the treatment room for 3 hours while they worked on his wounds. None were life-threatening, they told her. He would recover fully. When they finally let her in, she found him lying on a bed with bandages covering half his body. He looked small again, diminished, nothing like the creature she had watched kill without hesitation. He saw her face, and something in his expression shifted. He said he was sorry she had to see that. She asked what he was. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he was human. That was the whole answer. That was what humans were, underneath the politeness and the diplomacy and the pretense of civilization. They were killers. Every single one of them carried the capacity for violence that she had just witnessed. It was their inheritance from a world that spent millions of years trying to murder them. She asked why he had hidden it from her. He said he had not hidden anything. He had simply chosen not to be that person anymore. When he left the military, he promised himself he would never fight again unless he had no other choice. Today, there was no other choice. She was in danger, and the math became very simple. What math, she asked. Her safety against their lives, he said. The equation solved itself. She stared at him. This man who read poetry and learned her language and never raised his voice had killed 7 warriors without hesitation to protect her. He spoke of it as simple arithmetic, as obvious as breathing. She asked if he would do it again. He met her eyes directly. He said that he would kill every in the galaxy if that was what keeping her safe required. He said it without emotion, without bravado, as a simple statement of fact. She should have been frightened. Every instinct of her species told her to flee from this predator wearing the mask of a gentle husband. Instead, she sat on the edge of his bed and took his hand in hers. She said that she had many questions. He nodded and said that he would answer all of them. She believed him. Cole was released from the medical center 2 days later. His wounds had closed with a speed that the doctors found disturbing. Human healing was apparently another thing the galaxy had underestimated. Brought him back to their quarters and made him sit. She had spent 2 days preparing her questions, organizing them into categories, trying to approach this conversation with the same logic she applied to diplomatic negotiations. But when she finally sat across from him, all her careful preparation vanished. She simply asked him to tell her everything. He leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment. Then he began to speak. He told her about Earth first. He said that humans called it a death world, though they did not use that term themselves. Every creature on the planet had evolved to kill or avoid being killed. The air carried diseases. The water hid predators. The land shifted and shook and burned. Humans survived by becoming the most dangerous things in their environment, and they did it without claws or fangs or venom. They did it with endurance and intelligence and a capacity for violence that had no upper limit. He told her about human history, the wars they had fought against each other, millions dead in conflicts that seemed pointless from the outside, the weapons they had built, capable of destroying entire cities in a flash of light, the way they had nearly ended themselves a dozen times before finally reaching the stars. He told her about the frontier colonies where he grew up, the lawlessness of those early settlements, the constant threat of pirate raids and hostile alien contact. His parents had been farmers trying to build something peaceful, and they had died for that dream when raiders came looking for easy targets. He told her about the military. He had enlisted at 16, lying about his age because he had nowhere else to go. They trained him to fight, and he discovered he was very good at it. Too good, perhaps. He rose through the ranks quickly because he kept surviving situations that killed everyone else. He told her about VII. His voice changed when he reached that part. It became flat and distant, as if he was reading from a report rather than describing his own memories. VII was a mining colony. They hit it without warning, a full raiding fleet against a civilian population. Cole was part of the relief force that arrived too late to prevent the slaughter, but they were not too late to catch the raiders before they escaped. The battle lasted 3 days. Cole described it in sparse terms, but she understood enough to grasp the horror. Close quarters fighting through the tunnels of a mining station, darkness and chaos and the constant sound of screaming. He killed more than he could count. He watched friends die beside him. He kept fighting because stopping meant dying and dying meant the one. When it ended, the relief force had taken the station back. The surviving colonists numbered in the dozens from an original population of thousands. The raiders were dead to the last soldier. Cole spent 3 months in military psychiatric care afterward. They told him he had something called combat stress syndrome. They gave him medication and therapy, and eventually cleared him for return to duty. But he was different after VII. He started volunteering for the most dangerous assignments, the ones nobody else wanted. He told himself he was protecting others, but part of him was simply looking for an enemy that could finally kill him. Listen to all of this without interruption. When he finished, silence hung between them. She asked why he had stopped, why he had volunteered for this marriage instead of continuing to chase death. He said that he was tired of killing, tired of watching people die, tired of being a weapon instead of a person. When the marriage alliance was announced, he saw a chance to become something else. A husband instead of a soldier, a builder instead of a destroyer. He said that he knew it was running away. He knew that the violence was still inside him, waiting. He had just hoped he would never have to use it again. She asked if he regretted protecting her. He shook his head immediately. Protecting her was the first time his capacity for violence had felt like a gift instead of a curse. For once he had fought for something that mattered to him personally, not just for duty or survival. She considered his words carefully. Then she said something that surprised them both. She said that she was glad he was dangerous. He looked at her with confusion. She explained. She had spent her entire life among a species that had forgotten how to fight. They relied on diplomacy and alliances, and the hope that more violent species would leave them alone. But hope was not protection. Words could not stop a raider. She had watched her people freeze while death walked through the door, and she had felt the helplessness of a species that had traded survival instincts for elegance. Then she had watched her husband stand up and fight. She said that she understood now why the Galactic Council wanted humans in the Alliance. It was not just about territory or trade. It was about having access to the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced, the one species that could look at a raiding party and see nothing but problems to be solved. Cole said that made him sound like a weapon. She shook her head. She said that weapons did not choose their targets. He did. He could have stayed down and protected himself. Instead, he chose to fight for her and for everyone else in that room. That was not the act of a weapon. That was the act of a guardian. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said that no one had ever called him that before. She moved closer to him. She took his hand, feeling the calluses and scars that marked a lifetime of violence. She said that perhaps it was time someone did. He looked at their joined hands. Something in his expression shifted, the walls he had built around himself cracking slightly. He said that he did not know how to be a guardian. He only knew how to fight and how to survive. She said that they would figure it out together. For the first time since the attack, he smiled. It was a small smile, hesitant and uncertain, but it was real. She realized that she was no longer afraid of what he was. She was grateful for it. The footage spread across the galactic networks within days. Security recordings from the council chamber showed a single human defeating 7 raiders in close combat. Analysts slowed the footage and studied every movement. Military experts from a dozen species wrote papers about human combat capabilities. The galaxy watched and reconsidered everything it thought it knew about humanity. The diplomatic station received hundreds of messages requesting more information. Several species formally requested human security attachments for their diplomatic teams. The Council quietly upgraded humanity's status from minor ally to strategic partner. No one spoke of primitive newcomers anymore. Found herself in demand for interviews and consultations. Everyone wanted to know about her human husband, the one who had killed 7 warriors to protect a room full of diplomats. She answered their questions carefully, revealing nothing personal, presenting Cole as exactly what the galaxy wanted to see. A capable guardian, a valuable ally, a reason to take humanity seriously. Cole stayed out of the spotlight. He refused all interview requests and avoided public appearances. When she asked why, he said that he did not want to become a symbol. Symbols stopped being people. He had spent enough of his life being a weapon. He did not want to be an icon too. But the galaxy had already decided what he was. The sent threats. They declared Cole a target for their entire species, a blood debt that would never be forgotten. Their raiding fleets reported standing orders to capture or kill him on sight. When told him about the threats, Cole simply nodded. He said that he had expected as much. They did not forget defeats, especially public ones. He would need to be more careful now. She asked if he was afraid. He considered the question seriously. Then he said that fear was useful because it kept you alert. But he was not worried. They would have to get through him to reach her, and he had already proven that was harder than it looked. His calm certainty should have frustrated her. Instead, it made her feel safe in a way she had never experienced before. The assassination attempt started 2 weeks later. The first was a poison hidden in a gift basket sent to their quarters. Cole detected it before she could open the package. The second was a sniper positioned on a maintenance platform with a clear line of sight to her office. Cole spotted the reflection of the scope and moved her to safety before the shot could be fired. The third was a group of hired killers who breached the station's security and made it within 20 meters of their door. That group did not survive the encounter. Watched her husband become her shadow. He stayed close to her at all times, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. He slept lightly if at all, waking at the slightest sound. He tasted her food before she ate it. He checked every room before she entered. She told him that he needed to rest. He was going to destroy himself at this pace. He said that he would rest when she was safe. She pointed out that she might never be completely safe. They were patient. They could continue these attempts for years. He nodded and said that he could continue protecting her for years. The duration did not matter. The math was still simple. She grabbed his arm and forced him to look at her. She asked why he cared so much. Their marriage was political. They barely knew each other. Why was he willing to destroy his health and his peace of mind for someone he had only met months ago? Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he said that maybe it had started as politics. Maybe in the beginning she was just a duty, an obligation he had accepted along with the marriage contract. But somewhere along the way, that had changed. He said that she was the first person in years who had treated him like a human being instead of a weapon or a monster. She had learned his language. She had asked about his thoughts. She had held his hand after watching him kill and told him that she was glad he was dangerous. He said that he had forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone. She had reminded him. He said that protecting her was not a burden. It was the first thing that had felt meaningful since VII. She did not know what to say. Words seemed insufficient for the moment. So instead she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. It was the first time she had embraced him voluntarily. His body was tense for a moment, surprised by the contact. Then slowly his arms came up to hold her in return. She said that she did not want a protector who destroyed himself for her sake. She wanted a partner, someone who would stand beside her instead of in front of her, someone who would let her share his burdens as he shared hers. She said that she wanted to start over, not as political allies, not as convenient strangers, as something real. He pulled back slightly to look at her face. His eyes searched hers for something. Whatever he found seemed to answer a question he had not asked. He said that he would like that. She smiled, and after a moment he smiled back. It was strange, she thought, how much had changed since their wedding day. She had expected a monster and found a gentle man. She had expected a burden and found a partner. She had expected to spend centuries watching a primitive creature age and die, and instead she found herself hopping for every year she could get. The galaxy called him a god of war. They called him a devil. The diplomatic community called him humanity's most effective ambassador. She called him Cole. That night they sat together on their small balcony, watching the stars spin past the station's windows. His hand found hers in the darkness. She did not pull away. She asked if he was happy. He thought about it. Then he said that happy was a complicated word, but content, yes. Grateful, definitely. Hopeful in a way he had not felt in a very long time. She leaned her head against his shoulder. She said that was enough for now. They could figure out the rest together. And they would have time. Perhaps not the thousands of years her species enjoyed, but enough. Enough to build something real. Enough to matter. She had married a human to secure peace. She had watched him fight like a god of war. And somehow, against all expectations, she had found something she never thought a political marriage could provide. She had found home,